Hello? Yeah. Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Penny Thompson and I am the mathematics subject leader here at the Raha Primary School. As Mr. Michael explained, when we're talking about the PYP, we are speaking about the grades from EY1 all the way through to grade 5. We talk about the primary section and the EY section, but for a PYP curriculum purpose, we're one group, and certainly the teachers work together thinking in that sort of vertical line that we're from EY1 all the way to grade 5. Okay, so just to give you a brief overview of what I'm going to speak about today, I'm going to go through the written curriculum as it comes from the IB organisation, and also how that is translated to this context here at Raha when it comes to mathematics. I'm then going to talk about what mathematics looks like in our classrooms here at Raha from early years through to the upper primary. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we assess our students and the purpose of these assessments, and then how you can help your students at home, which of course is really the cornerstone of our relationship here as we're working together as teachers and parents to really work out what can that relationship look like between home and school, and putting your child in the centre of that relationship. The quote on the board is an extract from the IB documentation. So the IB is a worldwide organisation, and within the PYP, which is the primary section of that IB, we have a mathematics scope and sequence. So this planning document comes from the IB itself, and is used to guide the teaching and learning of mathematics in IB schools around the world. And I think the quote on the board really encapsulates what we're all about when it comes to mathematics learning in a primary school that is focused on inquiry-based learning. And really something to keep in mind is that we have a cyclical curriculum. It's not linear. And there are always going to be links to life outside the classroom, and that's something that we really look forward to and get excited about as teachers, is how can we make the learning that's happening in the classroom link to our students' lives outside of school. Okay, so the mathematics curriculum as set out from the IB is divided into developmental phases and strands of mathematics. So the phases roughly translate to EY1, EY2 and grade 1 together, grade 2 and grade 3 together, and grade 4 and grade 5 together. Now, obviously we know that not all students learn the same things at the same time, but when we come to sort of organising the written curriculum, that's generally how it works out. Within those phases, we have the 5 strands of mathematics. These are number, pattern and function, shape and space, data handling, and measurement. Now, if you've come from different curriculum backgrounds, the content of these strands will not be much different than what you're used to from, say, an Australian curriculum, or a British curriculum, or American curriculum, but the terminology in every PYP school will be the same. Okay, so if you were to walk into a mathematics setting here at Raha, it's going to look different depending on what grade level you're in and what the focus is. But there are certainly some commonalities that you will find no matter whether you're in an EY setting or an upper primary setting. Okay, so the The IB documentation that I briefly spoke about before is standard across the world and used in all PYP schools. Generally, schools themselves will then develop a more specific curriculum document, which we call a scope and sequence as well, that maps out more specifically learning outcomes for those 5 strands and then across those phases as well. So as teachers, that's what we're referring to when we start to plan our yearly overviews and then more specifically our unit planners as well. As parents, you can find this information in the curriculum guides and in the newsletters that come from your grade level. So you'll know what outcomes are coming up, what the topics are, what the conceptual understandings are, and so forth. It's important also to just keep in mind that the teachers collaborate across the grade level, so that's what we call horizontal articulation, and then we also have vertical articulation, so teachers from different grade levels will be collaborating to make sure that what's happening, for example, in a grade 2 setting is really setting those children up for the next year's learning in grade 3 and so forth, and that is also relevant between grade 5 and grade 6, so we work with our grade 6 counterparts just to make sure that the content and the style of learning is articulated vertically throughout the school. So from our scope and sequence, which maps out the outcomes from EY1 up to grade 5, grade level teams will develop a yearly overview to map out when the different strands of mathematics are going to be taught. Number tends to be taught in a cyclical fashion throughout the year, and the other strands tend to be linked to our units of inquiry. In fact, wherever possible, mathematics is linked to our units of inquiry, and that strengthens that transdisciplinary nature of the PYP that Mr. Michael introduced before. If you walk into an early years classroom, you'll notice that the majority of the learning is play-based. It's very rare to see worksheets, as an example, and if there is ever sort of written work that goes with the mathematics learning in an EY setting, it's always linked to a hands-on play-based activity to record that learning and understanding. As you move throughout the primary section, the emphasis becomes less so on play as a method of teaching, and more to sort of authenticity in the maths situation. So again, those links to life outside of school, hands-on, authentic learning and teaching. The role of assessment. Obviously, the purpose of assessment is to find out what comes next for each student. So in different times of the year, this is going to have a slightly different look or a different feel, but keeping in mind that we always want to know what's next for each student. In the early years, this tends to be observational and very, very natural for the student. So it won't usually be an activity that's very different than the type of learning that they've been doing during that topic of mathematics. Teachers might use observational checklists, anecdotal records, work samples, for example, that can track a student's learning in an EY setting. In the primary section, we tend to think more topic-based throughout the year. As I said, those topics do lend themselves to our units of inquiry. When a topic of maths is about to begin, the teachers will design a pre-assessment. This doesn't necessarily need to be a test. It is an activity or a game even, a classroom activity of some sort where the teacher can gauge where each student is at when it comes to that topic. Assessment continues throughout the teaching and learning time for that area of mathematics, always thinking about what is next for each student. And then there is either a summative task at the end or a reflective rubric used so that the teacher and the student and the parent are able to articulate where the student started, where they're going, and what their particular goals are in an individual way. We also use a MAP test, which parents from grade 3 and up will have recently heard about. The MAP test is an external assessment which is not directly aligned to our curriculum, but is a quite good overview of all areas of mathematics. As I mentioned, it's an externally set assessment, but it is very helpful for us as a school because we can look for trends across grade levels or trends in the different areas of maths that helps inform our teaching and planning. So that MAP assessment is coming up soon for grades 3, 4 and 5, and I know that there's been some recent communication about that as well for you. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time now talking about those 5 strands of mathematics that I introduced earlier, and more specifically what you can do as parents at home to support your child's learning when it comes to these strands. Okay, so I'm going to start with number, pattern and function. The reason that I've put these together is that quite often in a classroom setting, these strands are taught together. Some of the strategies are very similar, and they really lend support to each other. When it comes to number work, we are really focusing on accuracy over speed. So when we're working with games and activities, we're really building up strategies that students can use and apply in different settings when it comes to their number sense and working with the 4 operations. So at home, things that you can do are definitely board games, both logic-based ones and computational activities. Card games, any kind of counting or strategy work is really going to help your students reinforce what they've been working on at school. With pattern really is a big foundation of our mathematics teaching here at school and in really any school, because mathematics is all about patterns. So we're looking for patterns in numbers, patterns in the built and natural environment. So they're the kind of things that you can point out with your child, and depending on what age they're at, guide those conversations and look for further information as well. Okay, shape and space. In an early years setting, this is very much about the properties of 2- and 3-dimensional shapes and directions. These are the foundation for what happens in the primary setting as well, and all students benefit from exploration using different shapes in their natural and man-made environment, working on directions. Games like battleships and other spatial awareness games are really helpful for this strand of maths. And giving and following directions. And of course, at the different stages of your child's education, they're going to be able to do this in different ways. It might be forwards and backwards, left and right, north, east, southwest. Measurement, the easiest way to support your child with measurement is to have lots of measurement tools around the house and encourage them to use them in authentic ways. So definitely having lots of measuring cups, scales, rulers, measuring tapes, timers, and really encouraging your child to use them in an authentic way. So cooking, craft, design, and so forth. Data handling, any kind of sorting or organising is going to help this area of mathematics. Again, it's obviously different for different age groups. If with your older child, you might find interesting examples of data in the media. You can talk about bias. You can talk about how we collect and present data. Students love setting goals, for example. And this is an example of how students can collect information and track it. So, for example, how long they spend reading each night, or how high they can jump, or different things that they can measure and then track. And again, that shows how the different areas of maths can be combined. Another tool that we have to support our students with their mathematics is Mathletics. Mathletics is a subscription program that we as a school subscribe to from grade 1 to grade 5. It is an app, but there's also a website. Most of you have probably had your first introduction to Mathletics. Students all have a login and password, and teachers can set particular activities to support what's happening in the classroom. We don't use it as a one-stop shop for how we teach, but it really does reinforce what's happening in our more inquiry-based lessons. And it's also a great way to practice math skills and understanding at home. If you have any issues with Mathletics, the first step is certainly to make sure that the app and iPad are up to date. If they are, double check that the students' username and password work on the website. And if you're still having difficulties, contact your homeroom teacher or myself, and we can get to the bottom of it. Okay, so generally how you can support your child's mathematics learning at home. The big push here is to have positivity when it comes to mathematics. And for some of us, that can be a little bit of a challenge because our own memories of mathematics in our own education might not be overly positive. So I think it's very important just to keep in mind that our students have fun maths lessons happening here at school. We do have authentic links between their mathematics learning at school and their outside world. And it's great when parents can identify those links and strengthen them at home. We talk a lot about having a growth mindset, and the students, particularly as they work through the primary section of the school, become familiar with the idea of working hard, feeling good about having a challenge, and working towards goals. And that's something that we really like our parents to encourage and strengthen at home as well. Being role models with mathematics is extremely important as well. So where possible, please involve your child in mathematics around the home and in everyday life. So for example, if you're at a restaurant and you need to split the bill, I know it's quicker sometimes to pull out the iPhone and split the bill that way, but it's great to be able to model that mathematics is something that can be done. It doesn't need to be fast, but it's something that is useful to be able to do yourself. So model being able to add up the bill yourself and splitting it, or whatever the situation might be. A quick note about home learning. As much as possible, our home learning is designed to be independent for each student. If your child is having trouble with their home learning, that's something that the homeroom teacher really needs to know. But wherever possible, these tasks can be done independently. You can show encouragement and be around for the work, and again, take a conversation further if needs be. And the same goes with their Mathletics work as well. So keep an eye on what's happening, encourage the student, but really, if they're having trouble with the work, please make sure your classroom teacher knows. Seesaw is a great way to show encouragement and involvement as well, and your children love it when you can make personal comments about their progress in mathematics. Here are some just general ideas about things that you can do as a family that support all areas of mathematics: cooking, board games, measurement, planning travel, planning activities. All of these things really support the mathematics learning that happens here at school. That last point there with the board games, there's a fantastic shop in Awada Mall called Back to Games. They are an excellent resource for all types of board games, not only specifically for mathematics, but It's really worthwhile checking them out. And you can actually test out their games. They'll let you have a go in the shop there, so sort of try before you buy. Think Fun is another company that I would recommend. You can order their games online, and they really promote logical thinking, and support lots of areas of our maths as well. Okay, so to support your role, supporting your child, of course, the first step is to speak with your homeroom teacher. We have our regular grade level newsletters, which will outline what areas of mathematics are going to be coming up in the classroom. UCubed is an excellent website. It's developed by Jo Bala from Stanford University, and that she really does a lot of work in that area of growth mindset within mathematics. There's an excellent online course that is run through that website. It's free, and it's called How to Learn Maths for Parents. It's a really good independent course that you can go through. And then, of course, myself. So that's my email address up there, and I'm happy to answer any questions at any time. I'm going to pass over to Christina now, and we will have a general question and answer session at the end.
Hi, my name is Christina and I'm head of language from EY1 to grade 5, and you're going to find a lot of the information from Penny and I are very similar because that's the way the IB is designed. Now, the natural progression for language is students are learning language from the time they're born. They are acquiring, they're listening to you, they're observing, they are taking in every facial expression, and it doesn't matter what language you're speaking, they're learning a way to communicate. As they start to get older, their muscles get stronger, they start to reach for you, they start to change their voice, their expressions. They learn that this type of cry will get you running, and this type of giggle will make you smile. So they're already learning a way to communicate. From that, then they start to progress into making marks. So they are writing, they're scribing. We would call it scribbling. And, you know, to us it's like, oh yeah, well done. But actually it's a very important step on their progress to being a writer. So once they start watching you, mimicking you, they see you reading, and then they want to start reading, and they start looking at books. And then they're turning pages and making up their own stories. And then they progress into actually realizing that writing involves making particular marks. Now, that progression, that way language is learnt starts at home and it comes into the school. There's no beginning, there's no end. It just continually evolves and grows until they have acquired language as we know it. So how do we teach language at Raha? In the PYP, we like to use a lot of transdisciplinary. We like to combine everything together so that it's more realistic. In the EY, we use a whole language approach, which means that we don't just have 40 minutes and this is them learning how to read or how to write. Instead, that they're working through the whole day with lots of different activities designed to help them on that road of being a reader, a writer, and a good communicator. They have activities, they have games, they have little stations where they get to explore. We do lots of things which encourage their communication skills orally to start, especially in EY1. Because the more vocabulary they have, the more that will link to their reading, to their writing, to being able to stand up here and present. So we do encourage a lot of play, and what we do is we try to make learning fun in the EY. When it comes to assessments, we're looking more at observational. We're looking at, do they know the names of their letters? Right down in EY1 to EY2, but it's not expected, okay, they've got to have this by this time. Instead, it's just continual progress. They're learning at their speed, and we're encouraging as much play as possible and as much communication between the students and the teachers. So how do we support beginning reading? In the early years, we do a lot of visual literacy. Visual literacy is the cornerstone, and we use it all the way up through to university. We want the students to be able to talk about pictures, to be able to interpret them, to be able to use a picture to gain information. And this is one of the key skills when they first start reading. We start with giving books that are wordless. And the idea of that is so that they are talking about the pictures, making up their own stories. There's no stress of what does this word have to mean. Instead, it's a natural way to learn reading, how to speak, what's the sentence structure like. Then once they start getting ready to want to read with words, then they will start getting books with very simple sentences. And what you will find in those books, which will occur in either EY1 or EY2, is that they will have a simple sentence and maybe the last word is different. So on that example, the word rock, there's a picture of a rock, and that idea of linking the pictures to the words. So we do a lot of work, and it's not a sit-down 40-minute lesson with the students. Instead, it's casual. When we're reading to the students every day, we might be pointing out pictures and linking it to the words when we're reading it to them. We are modelling the writing around the room by having signs all over the rooms. We are encouraging the students to point to the pictures or to follow along with the words. And we just do a lot of activities which are fun for them, but are actually all these tiny little steps to help them so that when they start to read more independently, they've got these strategies. Once it comes to higher in the EY, going into the PYP, the students are becoming more independent readers. Now, the big focus is the 3 areas of reading, which is comprehension, decoding, and fluency. Now, students are pretty good at decoding. As parents, we're pretty good at helping them work a word out, looking at the first letter, looking at the first sound, trying to figure out what it could be, and they've got that strategy with looking at the picture to help them. One of the areas that we end up doing a lot of work on is comprehension. So can they not just read it, but can they understand it? Can they take that information? Can they reorganize the information? Can they tell us things that are not in the book, that they've used their knowledge from home as well as their knowledge of the story they've read? So a lot of analysing. And as they go up through the primary, this gets more difficult. And what will happen is you will see that it will look like their reading progression has slowed down. So you'll see them in the earlier years and even in grade 2 that they're doing all these jumps and their books are getting harder and harder and harder and it's more challenging. But when they get to grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, the books don't seem to change as much. But what's happening is the content inside is getting more difficult for them to understand. And the best way you can support them with that is doing a lot of reading at home. And once they start reading not out loud, which is a natural progression for the students, then getting them, just asking them, what was the book about? Doing when they give you that retell, oh, this happened and this happened, then what we do is we ask them more specific questions. We ask them questions that might not be in the book. We ask them questions that link to what they already know. And it's really important that we make that connection with the world around them to what they're doing, what they're reading in the books. Which is why with the IB, we try to bring lots of things together. And when we're doing reading, we try to match our topics with our unit of inquiry. So therefore, they're building up more of that vocabulary. Throughout the year, the students will be reading with the teachers, and the teachers will be monitoring their comprehension, their fluency. Are they using expression? Are they changing their voices for characters? Are they interesting to listen to if they do read out loud? And as they get older, there's more emphasis placed on those because they've got the decoding. They can read anything they pick up, but can they actually use it? Writing comes after children have acquired their reading, they've acquired how to speak. Now, in the early years, what we talked about earlier, the mark making. There is lots of mark making, especially when they start EY1. There's lots of just little squiggles, and to them that squiggle means an entire sentence. And today that sentence was about a car, and tomorrow that sentence is about a clown. And that's okay. That is something that we celebrate. We love it when we see them making a mark, being proud of it, and going, that is me communicating with you. We know at times that can be a bit hard if they're drawing on walls. So have a few things like some cardboard out for them to draw. Have areas. You can even buy blackboard paint and they can actually write on a wall. But any of that mark making, don't try and push them straight into doing a letter. What will happen is as they're playing, as they're noticing the letters all around the rooms, as they're noticing that we label everything, they start wanting to mimic. They love to watch what we're doing and they love to mimic us. So then they will start drawing those letters. In the EY, we'll also be supporting with the directions of the letters. We do lots of activities where they get to use their whole hand, their whole body to make those body movements for the letters. We do uppercase and lowercase, and we do lots of activities to just get them to link from a simple mark going towards a letter. And one of the areas we focus on first is their name. It's something they see everywhere. It's something that they're reading a lot. So it's a really good place to start with tracing out the letters and linking it to writing. Now, something that we don't think too often, and a big part of the EY, is being a strong writer. And to do that, you actually need muscle strength. Just like babies, when they learn to roll over, then they start grasping their steps. They get stronger, then they do it more often. Now, with writing, believe it or not, there was a time when we were writing, and after half an hour writing, we would have to shake our hands out, and our hands would be feeling sore. And if you're trying a different language, you'll find because you're making different movements for your letters, it's hard to keep it up. So we do lots of activities in the EY that strengthen the body for writing. We also do it for speaking. We do muscle movements. Now for writing, these simple activities, picking things up, anything that is fine motor, using pegs, Play-Doh. We have lots of little things for them to play with. And the reason isn't just because they've got little fingers, is because we want them to keep doing those sort of movements because it builds up the strength of those fingers so that when they do start actually writing and they're writing for longer periods, they can handle it. Their hands know how to hold the pencils, so we work on that. We do also some core body strength activities where the children are lying on their stomach and doing some exercises. And the reason we do those is because we want the students to also be able to sit up. You'll often see, especially when they're younger, they'll sit for a little bit and then they'll just start slouching down, or they'll lean all over the table, which is not going to be good posture for when they're writing. And it's also going to mean they're going to find it harder to write for longer periods of time. So that is one of the things we incorporate into the early years as well. We don't have formal writing assessments in the EY. Instead, what we do is we are just observing, we're looking at samples of their writing, so we do activities where we support them, and then others where we take a step back for a little while, see what they're doing, and we just watch their progress as they're going. In the early years, it's more about exploring writing, getting the strength, and understanding directions of letters. Imagination. IB is about play. We spend lots of time on play. We want the children to explore, to experiment. We want the children to grow their imagination. Their imagination leads to being a good storyteller, to come up with ideas for their writing. Imagination is so easy to create when you're young. We want them off the iPads and we want them dressing up, playing in a kitchen area, giving them a simple box and going, what do you think could be inside it? All of those can lead to writing ideas when they're older. So we start this process early. If you walked into any of the EY rooms, you will see there's lots of little areas. There's lots of time for them just to get in and become someone else. them communicating to somebody else, another child, talking about the blocks they're building, and they're building the Burj Khalifa. Sounds a little bit like maths, but it's also English. We're building that vocabulary. We're putting things together. And all that will help them when they get to grade 1, grade 2. It's that foundation stuff that we are doing in the EY that looks like it's just fun, but in reality it's very serious learning. It can be done in English, it can be done in Arabic, it can be done in any language, because they're all skills for building the language acquisition. Writing in the primary looks a little bit different. We take all that we've got from the early years with our imagination. We take all the little bits that we're learning about this is a story. We've read lots of books about fairy tales, so that we've got an idea of what the structure would be when we write our narratives. Now, what we do in the primary is we have more specific 40-minute lessons. And we might have 1 or 2 of those a day, but they're focused on a particular skill. Now, what we do is we incorporate writing into all our units. So we might be doing, for example, a unit about the body. And then what the students might be doing for writing is they might be doing research. And they have to study one particular system of the body, and they've got to use their iPads, they've got to use books, and they've got to research what that system does. And they're learning about adding captions and pictures. So we try to incorporate our writing into our units, but we also allow specific skill time in the primary. Now, with writing, we do lots of genres. We do persuasion, where they might be writing you a letter because they want a pet. We do public speaking. We want to persuade them to open up a new campus. We might be doing a story, narrative, and we've had students published before. We might be studying exactly how do you write a report. And all of these different genres, we build on them every year. So grade 3, they do it again in grade 4, but this time they're adding the title here, or they're adding different fonts, because these different fonts might influence the audience more. So it becomes more formal. And once again, the assessment is that we look at their writing, we give them checklists as they're writing, and we look at how they're going and just continually assess them throughout the year for that. But we break it all down into not just can they spell, but do they understand the structure? Are they getting their point across through the different genres of the writing? One of the common questions we have is, do you have a phonics program? What about spelling? What's happening? And we do have phonics. We have something called THRAS, which is starting in EY1 and goes all the way through to grade 2. And what it does is it focuses on not just what a letter is, but all the different choices that sound could be. So for example, if we're making the sound K, there's C, there's K, there's CK. In Arabic, there's KH. We look at all the different ways that we can do it, and that gives them better choices. We try to do our spelling and our phonics more as the IB way of inquiry. Here's a sound. Can you find any other examples? Your spelling that goes home, when it starts in the EY, it's going to be sight words, most likely, which will be those words that are most commonly used when they read, when they write, and when they speak. Then it will progress into unit words of what they're doing for their unit, so that they're building that vocabulary, be it a science vocabulary, mathematics vocabulary, or one to do with, it's going to link with their writing. Then it will go into, you might get a phonic base. And the children will then be doing activities at home, doing activities at school, where we show them how to find what does that word mean. Write it with multiple colours, write it in sand, write it with slime. You know, just getting that practice of it. Putting a picture on, putting the word on the wall, get a ball, throw it at it. So getting that whole body involved. That is different for every grade. So the best way to find out is to chat with your teacher, and they'll give you an idea of what they're doing. Obviously, in the early years, EY1, EY2, you're not going to see a lot of that spelling coming home. We try to do a lot of it in class because we incorporate it into how we're reading a book. Whereas when you're in the upper primary, you'll see more of it coming home, and they might have a weekly spelling test. So what can you do at home? Meaningful talk. Talk to your children. Don't just say yes, no, or make a very simple conversation. Try and use as much vocabulary as you can. The more words you use, the more words they hear, and the more they can use. They love to mimic. You'll see them, there's times where they just repeat and they just sound like myself, and I'm like, well, that's what I sound like. So if I'm going to use very simple words, then they're going to use them back. If we want them to be able to talk about measurement, so a link for maths is when you're going shopping, talk about what you're going to buy. Talk about, use the words ingredients. We're going to make something, we need ingredients. Okay, so what do we need? We need some flour, and you can talk measurements when you're talking how much you need, and those words also translate for English because add is plus. We do a lot of cross-wording. So conversations in the car. How was your day at school? It's fine. Really? Because I heard this. Or you could make up your own story. Really? Because I heard that Mr. Michael was standing on top of the tables at the cafeteria. And that will then lead into the conversation because they're tired. It's been a long day. The first thing they're going to want to do is not talk to you and go home and go on their iPad or on their computer or just go outside and kick a ball. So the best way to get kids is to play dumb, make up an outlandish story, use your imagination so that they'll use their imagination. When you're reading a book at home, come up with some other stories. Predict what do you think will happen. You predict something totally out of this world, and then they'll correct you and then actually start speaking. But while you're doing that, you're offering them some new language. Read. Read, 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 read. That is going to help their oral, it's going to help their writing, and it helps their reading and especially their comprehension. How often do you actually sit at home and just read in front of them? As teachers, we try to read to them every day in class, but there will also might be time they have a little bit of free reading. If they have a tiny bit of quiet free reading, us teachers model it as well. We grab a book and try and read. Because if they see us reading, they want to read. They always like to copy us. Reading at home as a bedtime activity. We don't really have much time in the mornings, so maybe an afternoon or a nighttime, even if it's just one day a week. It doesn't need to be in English. I cannot stress that enough. You can read in Arabic, you can read in Polish, you can read in any language you like. Any reading you do is going to support their learning of English and their learning of their own language. So please, it's the only homework that we ask is 10 minutes of reading every day. You can do it electronically on RazKids, which the students have from EY2 to grade 2. You can do it through library books. You're always welcome to go to the library and borrow books with your children or without your children. Or you can just read the home readers that will come home. They'll get home readers at least 2 a week. They can change daily if they want to. Last one would be supporting all the forms of writing. Support those squiggles. Support even though it's misspelt, they're writing you a letter, they've forgotten the capitals, they've forgotten the full stops, they've misspelt a word. Their words are big and small, but they've written. It's really hard to keep the students interested in writing. It's a struggle we have, and it's something that we work on at Raha, is that we try to choose the writing topics that will interest them, and we try to link it with what they're doing so it doesn't seem as extra. But when we're doing it, we don't focus on more than one area at a time. So we might be focusing, at the moment in my class, I might be focusing on using a capital letter at the start of a sentence. Now, that word's spelled incorrectly and so is that one, but I'm going to praise them. You've got the capital letter, fantastic. When they've got that, move on to the next thing. If you focus on one thing instead of 5, they're more likely to keep writing for you and they're going to feel that success. So knowing that writing is not going to be perfect even when they finish grade 5, we're slowly building. If you keep supporting that, then you'll be doing the same as what we're doing at school, which will then make them a great writer. If you need any help, you will find the curriculum, just like in the maths, you'll find it in the parent handbook. There's what we're doing, all the outcomes for reading, all the outcomes for writing. The phases are the same as mathematics, so those age groups that go together, but you'll see everything that we're going to do, and in the newsletters going home, you'll see the outcomes. We always put some English activities in there for you to do. Your homeroom teacher is a good source. If you say, hey, I'd love to work on this, many of them, if you ask, they will have you come in and they'll show you the strategies they're using. They'll show you what they're doing, and so that you can do it at home as well. Or if you've got an idea, talk to us. We are more than happy to hear it. And there is my email address. If you have any questions, I am more than happy to sit down with people to give you different ideas of how to do something, or even if they're doing something fantastic at home and you would like me to celebrate it with them, then please send me an email. Now, thank you for listening. It was a bit of a long session, combining both of us together, but hopefully that's given you an idea of what to expect when you walk into one of the classrooms and what they're doing. And what we'll do right now is we'll open the floor for any questions, be it for Miss Penny for maths or for myself for language, or even if you're not sure which category it goes into. Any questions? Yep. For grade 3, no. Grade 3 doesn't have RAS kids. We do have students that may need RAS kids for extra support, which we do give out counts, and we also bring it down to EY1 for the students who are ready for it early. But what we hope is that by grade 3, their reading is quite evolved. They can decode, their interest is starting to peak, and we're hoping that they're going to then go more to a lot more paper books. They've got the library. By grade 3, they should be able to choose any book in the library, hopefully, and read, and that we're supporting with a lot of home readers that have got chapters as well. So we're trying to move them in a different avenue from grade 3 and just having that extra, more paper orientated. Yeah, they like the more electronics. On the library page, and it's one of the things we sort of show them, is there is actually a huge collection of digital readers on the library homepage that the children access. And there's read 2 stories, and then there's also links where they can go and read from other libraries too. Sorry, first, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is about Mathletics and how the activities are chosen and assigned. In answer to your question more directly, no, there isn't a pattern that is consistent from classroom to classroom. The Mathletics activities are assigned by the teacher and will relate to what's happening across the grade level in mathematics at that time. So we can turn on and turn off different activities, and we can assign different activities to different students. So no, it's not the case that all students get assigned the same activities and have the same start date and due date. It's individual based on what's happening in the classroom and the teacher's observations. Some families spend a lot of time on Mathletics at home, so those students get through more activities. The teacher may assign different work for that student because they've gone through more. Other families might not spend as much time on Mathletics at home, so that student will probably not get assigned as many because we don't need the student to be overloaded every time that they log on that there's 20 new activities. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. Okay, and you had a second question as well.
the question's spelling to do with how the spelling lists go home and the way they're designed. It is different from grade by grade. There is a bit more of a progression in the grades, which is slowly evolving, where the students don't have a structured list. They're instead given a sound or a particular phonic area to focus on, and they might be given 2 weeks to do this. And the focus of that is because we're trying to go more inquiry. If students memorize a list of 10 words, what we're sort of finding is that in about a month's time, they've totally forgotten those words and they'll spell them wrong again. They're not actually understanding why the words is spelt like it is. So what you'll find is if you're in grade 2, if you're in grade 1, if you're in grade 4, those grades have already moved towards a more inquiry-based spelling, where the children will do some work in the school, they'll get a particular phonics or a particular grouping of letters that have a sound that will go home, and then at home they need to look for any of those words, any word when they're reading books that have that sound. So they're doing a bit of their own research, and then when they come to school for their test, the teacher will have chosen 10 words that they haven't told the students. And then when they're assessing them, they're looking at, did they get the right sound choice? Not was the word spelt correct. It's okay if the whole word's not spelt correct because they haven't studied it. But what we were after, what they were looking for, have they got that pattern? And then what will happen is when they're writing and they've got to figure out a new word, how to spell it, they're more likely to recall that information. So each grade level, there are grades that do it differently, where they send home the 10 words already and they study that, and then some are moving more towards the inquiry-based. Yep. Good morning.
Okay, so there were 2 questions there. The first was asking for clarification about what we mean by authentic tasks in the classroom, but more specifically with assessments. When we're talking about an authentic task, something that comes to mind, for example, is the grade 4 Sook Day. So in that unit of inquiry, the grade 4 students work in teams to create a business, which ends up being a market stall at the end of that unit of inquiry. Now, that unit is going to incorporate all areas of the curriculum. From a mathematics perspective, the assessment might be the counting of the money. So observing how the students apply their addition and subtraction strategies to efficiently count the money that they've made and calculate their profit and loss. So that's an example of an authentic project that's happening throughout a unit of inquiry, and then an assessment task at the end. Obviously, in different grade levels, those tasks are going to be different, but I hope that that's an example of something that's an assessment but not a sit-down test. The second question was about our home learning. The home learning is based on our unit of inquiry. Generally, units of inquiry last for about 6 weeks. Sometimes they're a little bit shorter, sometimes they're a little bit longer. At the beginning of a unit, the home learning will be posted on Seesaw. The home learning consists of some compulsory tasks and suggested home learning tasks. Depending on the grade level, the compulsory tasks will always include reading. And in some of the older grade levels, there may be other tasks that need to be completed. Generally, this tends to be work that isn't finished in class but needs to be completed. And the due dates for that kind of thing are usually negotiated with the teacher. As an example, I teach grade 3 at the moment, but last year I taught grade 5. We had a lot of writing work, as an example, that would be introduced in class and would have a particular due date. There would be time given in class, but if students wanted or needed more time to work on that task, the due date didn't finish, but they might need to do some work on it at home. The suggested home learning tasks are suggested. So they are activities that are age appropriate and linked to whatever is happening in the classroom in the different areas of the curriculum for that unit of inquiry period. We don't call them optional because we really encourage our students to do them. But at the end of the day, it's a family decision. Some families will make the decision that they are going to work on all those suggested tasks together or provide time for their children to work on those tasks. Other families may pick and choose from the tasks, and other families have got different ways to support their child's learning at home. And as a school, we respect all of those decisions. So we have those tasks available to support what's going on in the classroom, and as a family, you can make that decision. We do say as a family, not the child. So as the parents, you can have that conversation with your child about what's your expectations, and of course, your homeroom teacher will support that. Any other questions? Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, well, I would like to say thank you very much on behalf of Christina and myself for coming along today. Your presence here really just strengthens that relationship between home and school. We hope that we have given you an overview of the curriculum as it's written, but more importantly, how it comes alive in our classrooms and how it can be carried on at home with your support. Please don't hesitate to send any questions to Christina or myself, but of course your homeroom teacher as well may have more specific answers about your grade level. Thank you so much.